Hey, amazing fans! Welcome to another relaxing moment with VIVA'S Stories. Before we dive into the drama, don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us. Now, grab a seat, sit back, relax, and let's journey into the story together. The day Elira married was the brightest Duma's Hollow had seen in a decade. The skies were flawless. No cloud dared disturb the sun's gentle rain. The river, often sullen and gray in the dry months, sparkled like a spilled bowl of stars. Everything gleamed. Everything sang. Everyone, even the old ones with bad knees and older hearts, laughed with the joy of it. Everywhere hands clapped, feet danced, drums beat. And beneath the great baobab tree that crowned the village's sacred grounds, Elira stood in her ceremonial cloth, white silk embroidered with cobalt blue symbols of her lineage, beside Taron, the stranger with no past. Her skin looks like river stone, whispered an old woman. And that man, another said, he carries no shadow. Children raced barefoot through flower-strewn paths, giggling as they tossed handfuls of marigolds into the air. Elder women, wrapped in bold fabrics and stories older than they were, lined the path to the altar, humming praises for fertility and union. A young girl named Lemi, just 8, peeked from behind her mother's galley, wide eyes full of wonder. This was her first wedding, and it felt like watching a story unfold, the kind her grandmother used to tell only by firelight. Elira looks like a moon maiden, Lemi whispered. Hush, child, her mother said, swatting the air. Don't call down spirits on a wedding day. But Lemi couldn't stop staring. Elira didn't walk, she floated. Her face behind the veil shimmered with a soft glow, and each step she took seemed guided by something unseen. Beside her, Taron's jaw was clenched. His eyes, a stormy gray, never left the horizon. Some said he'd come from the north, others that he had no home at all. He spoke little and smiled less. Still, he had asked for Elira's hand with a ring of old gold and a bag heavy with coin, and that was enough. Let the joining begin. The voice came from Elder Oma, Duma's oldest spirit keeper. Her back bent like the bow of a canoe, but her voice could still split wood. She lifted her carved staff, tapping it thrice on the sacred stone. Today, she began, we bind man to woman, soul to soul. By blood, by earth, by sky, and by song. The drums fell silent. Elira and Taron faced one another, each holding the ends of the white thread that would bind their wrists. A breeze stirred. Somewhere, a goat bleated. Before your ancestors, before the ones not yet born, do you vow to share joy and burden? Oma asked. I do, Elira said, her voice a melody. Taron hesitated, just a flicker. Then, I do. The moment the thread touched both wrists, a piercing cry shattered the silence. It was a bird song, but not like any Lemi, or anyone, had ever heard. It was high and cold. Not sweet, not soft. Final. It felt like something being torn from the sky. Every head turned upward. A black shape perched atop the altar tree, small, no larger than a fist, but pulsing with presence. Its eyes glowed red. Its feathers shimmered violet when the sun hit them, then black again. Someone gasped. The Dirgebird, an old woman croaked. Elder Oma dropped her staff. The wedding must stop, she said. The bird sang again. Louder this time. A woman screamed. A boy began to sob. Then the bird spread its wings and vanished into the canopy. What followed was silence so deep it pressed on chests like a stone. The drums did not resume. Elira's hand slipped from Taron's. What was that? She asked, voice shaking. The Dirgebird, Elder Oma said again, as if naming it would soften its song. It only sings before death. Elira's eyes widened. But whose death? No one answered. That night, the wedding feast lay uneaten. Goat meat cooled on clay plates, and banana beer curdled in the sun. No one played music. No one danced. The villagers gathered in whispers. I remember it sang the night old Temba fell into the river. No, before the fever took the children. It sang then too. My mother said it sang before the fire came, remember? The year the trees burned without rain. They huddled around fires, around fear, speaking of a bird that hadn't been seen in 30 years. And in her chamber, Elira still wore her wedding cloth. She hadn't spoken since the bird sang. Taron was gone. He'd slipped away quietly after the ceremony, saying nothing. Elder Oma sat near the sacred tree, drawing symbols in the dirt with her staff, muttering prayers older than memory. And Lemi, curious and unafraid, tiptoed into the darkness. The forest edge was quiet. Too quiet. Lemi crept to where she'd seen the bird perched. She carried only a candle stub and a copper bracelet for protection. The wind had died. Even the frogs had silenced. Then she saw it. A feather, deep black, but when she turned it in her hand, it shimmered with hints of color. Blue, green, like oil in water. As her fingers curled around it, she heard the song again, faint, distant, as though sung from beneath the world. Then in a whisper, "Something pure must die." She froze. "Who said that?" she asked. Silence. She turned. No one. Only trees and stars, and a feather that now felt warm. By morning, the village felt colder. People walked slower. Eyes avoided eyes. The joy had died. The wedding that was supposed to be remembered for love would now be remembered for the song. And the question that lingered in every throat was one no one dared ask aloud. Who was the bird singing for? Was it Elira, the bride too beautiful to be real? Was it Taron, the man with no past? Was it Oma, too old to see another season? Or was it someone else entirely? Whatever the answer, one truth remained. The Dirgebird had returned. And when it sang, death always followed. The morning after the wedding, Duma's hollow wore grief like a second skin. The sky remained cloudless, but it no longer felt bright. The river still sparkled, but no one dared laugh beside it. The songs of the birds, real birds, felt off-key, like they were mimicking life, not living it. The Dirgebird had come. It had sung. And that changed everything. Inside her hut, Elira had not changed out of her wedding cloth. Her veil lay crumpled beside her sleeping mat, her eyes dry but distant. She hadn't slept. She hadn't cried. She only stared at the door as if waiting for someone, to enter. But Taron had not returned. He hadn't been seen since the ceremony. And that made people talk. Elder Oma sat in the gathering hut with the council of elders, a tight circle of leathery faces and trembling hands. The air inside smelled of herbs and old sweat. A fire crackled low in the center. "It has returned," Oma said, voice hoarse from the prayers she'd been muttering all night. "A bird," snorted Elder Koba, his walking stick tapping the floor. It was a bird. Perhaps even just a trick of the light. "It was no trick," Oma snapped. "It was the Dirgebird. I saw it. I felt it." "The people are scared," said Elder Senna, voice softer. "They whisper about death already. About bad omens. And rightly so." Koba narrowed his eyes. "This isn't the old days, Oma. We don't bend to bird calls and curses." But Oma stood, her back cracking, and pointed a trembling finger. "The last time that bird sang," she said, "we lost 13 children to the river. The time before that, the fire swept through our millet fields. You can doubt it all you want, but the Dirgebird marks the innocent. And something pure will die before the new moon." Silence fell. Only the fire dared make a sound. Out beyond the edge of the village, near the twisted fig trees that marked the sacred line between the living and the dead, Lemi walked alone. She clutched the strange feather in her hand, still black, still shimmering when she turned it. She'd hidden it in her mat during the night, afraid her mother would burn it if she saw. The voice she heard still echoed in her chest. Something pure must die. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt the weight of it, like a stone in her belly. As she crouched near the tree's roots, she spotted someone standing just beyond the grove. Taron. He was silent, eyes staring into the forest, hands clenched at his sides. Lemi didn't mean to speak, but her voice slipped out. "Mr. Taron?" He turned slowly as if waking from a dream. "Lemi," he said, "you shouldn't be here. Why did you leave the wedding?" He didn't answer. The silence between them was heavy. "Did you hear it too?" she asked. "The bird?" "Yes," he said finally. "I've heard it before." Lemi's heart quickened. When? Taron knelt down, suddenly serious. Listen to me, Lemi. If anyone asks, you didn't see me. You didn't speak to me. Understand? She nodded, eyes wide. And then he was gone, melting into the trees like a shadow. Back in the village, Elira stepped out of her hut. Her eyes found Oma, who was pouring a circle of salt around the altar tree. I want answers, Elira said. You won't like them. I deserve to know. If that bird came for me, I want to face it. Oma's gaze didn't waver. The Dirgebird doesn't come for people, she said. It comes for purity. For innocence. For the untainted. Then why now? Why on my wedding day? Oma sighed. Because that's when purity becomes something else. A life begins. A bond is made. Or broken. Elira's lip trembled. Then Taron. I do not know, Oma said. But I do know this. The Dirgebird song is not a warning. It is a marking. And the marked have already been chosen. That night, the village held a silent vigil. No drums. No fire. They simply gathered beneath the altar tree, listening to the darkness. And then the oldest man in the village, wary, blind since birth, spoke. Long ago, he said, the Dirgebird did not sing for death. Eyes turned toward him. In the time before the hollow, it was a guardian. A keeper of balance. It sang only when the line between worlds was crossed. What line? Someone asked. The line of justice. Of truth. Of blood. He tapped the ground with his cane. There was a time it sang not for the dying, but for the betrayed. A murmur spread. What betrayal has happened here? Asked a woman. No one could answer. But in the darkness, a feather drifted from the tree, landing between Elira's feet. But she bent to touch it, and when she did, she saw a vision. Taron standing in a red-lit room, speaking to a hooded figure. Silver coins. A whisper of her name. And then, his eyes turned black. She staggered back. No, she gasped. No, that's not real. But in her hand, the feather had vanished. Far from the village, Taron knelt in the shadow of the ravine. He reached into a hollow in the stone, retrieving a small wooden box. Inside, a second ring. Not Elira's. Another woman's. He closed his eyes, lips moving silently. I told them I wouldn't do it again, he whispered. But she looked just like her. Above him, hidden in the leaves, the Dirgebird watched. It did not sing. Not yet. The village of Duma's Hollow slept, but not in peace. The moon hung low and yellow, a dying eye watching the uneasy land. Dogs barked at nothing. Winds howled through dry grasses, carrying whispers not made by human tongues. Inside her hut, Elira could not rest. She sat cross-legged, the floor beneath her scattered with ashes and herbs, rituals she remembered from her mother's stories. But stories were no longer enough. Not when she'd seen a vision. Not when a feather had vanished in her palm. Not when she no longer knew the man she had married. Taron. His name was now like sand in her mouth, familiar, but unsteady. There was something off about him, something hollow behind his beautiful face. The vision had shown him in a red-lit room, handing over coins, whispering her name. Had he sold her? Had she been chosen? She lit the last of the incense. Thin blue smoke curled upward, slow and dancing. She whispered the name of her grandmother, long buried beneath the western trees. If you can hear me, Elira murmured, if there's any part of you left beyond the veil, tell me what to do. The smoke shivered, then twisted into the shape of a bird. And for the second time in as many nights, Elira heard it again. That song. Faint. Haunting. Like something sobbing through time. The words. Find the mask. Burn the thread. Or be the marked. Elira jolted, knocking over the incense burner. The smoke vanished. The song was gone. But the message stayed. Find the mask. Burn the thread. Or be the marked. Elsewhere, deep in the grove where the villagers never dared linger after dark, Lemi knelt in front of an old stone carving. She shouldn't have been out. Her mother had forbidden it, slapping her wrist when she found the feather hidden in her mat. But Lemi had to know. Why could she hear the bird even when it was silent? Why did the feather feel warm only to her? The stone in front of her showed an image carved long ago. A woman with outstretched arms, and above her, birds. One sang to the stars. The others screamed at her feet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the feather again. Still dark. Still shimmering. Are you real? She whispered. The trees swayed. Then a breath of wind, unnatural, cold, swept across the grove. Leaves danced in spirals. And in the center, something shimmered. A figure. Faint. Barely more than light. A woman with glowing eyes and a mouth that didn't move, but spoke anyway. Child of balance, the voice whispered, you carry the mark of hearing. The Dirgebird has chosen you, not for death, but for sight. I don't understand, Lemi said, trembling. You will. Then the figure was gone. Only wind remained. And in her palm, the feather had changed. Now it was white tinged with red. Back in the village, Elder Oma was burning old records by the fire, pages etched with names and rituals long since outlawed. Her fingers shook. She knew what the mask meant. She had buried it herself. And now, the old rites were waking again. The Dirgebird sang for the pure. But purity was not always innocence. Sometimes, it was power unspoiled. A threat to the old contracts. A risk to the balance. She had hoped this generation would never hear its cry again. But fate, like fire, never forgets its path. Elira moved like a ghost through the dark paths of the village, the moon casting silver onto her veil. She carried only a small satchel, inside it the burned thread that had once tied her wrist to Taron's. Find the mask, she repeated under her breath. She remembered an old tale, something Oma had once said after too much millet beer. There's a mask hidden beneath a fire pit in the abandoned hut, she'd whispered. One that was carved not by hands, but by voices. It sees all, but it demands a price. Elira reached the hut, a ruin half swallowed by vines. She stepped inside. The air was heavy, still watching. She dug through the ashes at the center of the hut, fingers stinging from embers that shouldn't have still been warm. And there it was. A mask, wooden, but unlike any she'd ever seen. It pulsed. It breathed. Eyes carved as mirrors. A mouth that never smiled. She reached for it. The moment her fingers touched its surface, her vision went black. A river. A child drowning. Taron standing on the shore, turning away. A silver ring. A knife. Her own face crying out. Then, silence. She pulled back, gasping. The mask fell from her hand. Taron, meanwhile, had returned to the outskirts of the village. His cloak was dirted, his eyes bloodshot. He'd gone to the seer in the far hills. The woman with the ruined face who spoke only to those already doomed. I married her, he had said. She's marked, isn't she? The seer had simply smiled. You married a mirror. But the bird sings not for her, but for the lie beneath her. He hadn't understood. But now, as he walked the path, he saw the village fires had gone out early. The drums had not played in days. They knew. They all knew. Lemi returned home to find her mother asleep, clutching an old talisman to her chest. She slid the feather beneath her mat and laid down. But sleep didn't come. Instead, she dreamed. A fire consuming the village. Elira screaming. A mask turning to ash. And above it all, 1,000 black birds circling, all singing the same note, the sound of endings. By sunrise, the village awoke to smoke rising. Not from firewood. From Oma's hut. The elder had collapsed in the night, clutching a torn page from a forbidden text. One word was burned into the dirt beside her. Sacrifice. And the song returned. Far away. Distant. But unmistakable. The Dirgebird was singing again. The fire from Elder Oma's hut had gone out by morning, but the questions it left behind burned hotter than ever. No one spoke during her burial. No one wailed, no drums played. She was laid into the earth in silence, the way warriors were, those who had seen too much. Elira watched from a distance, the mask hidden beneath her shawl. No one noticed her hand trembling. Last night had changed everything. The mask had shown her things, unforgivable things. Not just about Taron, but about herself. About the village. About truths buried deeper than any grave. As the villagers scattered from the grave site, she slipped away to a quiet grove where no one would follow her. Then, for the second time, she placed the mask against her face. It clamped onto her like a living thing. No string. No binding. It just sealed. And the world changed. She stood not in the grove anymore, but in a memory not her own. A hut. Dimly lit. A woman weeping. A baby wrapped in crimson cloth. A man, Taron's father, hovered in the doorway, face hard with regret. She's marked, the woman sobbed. The bird sang the night she was born. Then it must be done, he whispered. Elira gasped. The memory fractured, and suddenly she stood in another. A sacrifice on the altar stone. A girl with silver hair tied in white ropes, eyes wild with terror. A chorus of masked elders chanting. Smoke curling into the sky. And above it all, perched in the sacred tree, a bird with eyes like stars. It sang. The girl stopped screaming. And then, silence. Elira dropped the mask. The visions were gone, but the ache in her chest remained. She staggered back against a tree. The village had lied. Everything Oma and the elders had taught, the rites, the legends, had been crafted to hide something. The Dirgebird did not kill. It watched. It sang only when something sacred had been violated, when someone had been wronged beyond justice. The bird didn't bring death. It marked the forgotten dead. Elsewhere, Lemi found her hands changing. Ever since the feather turned white-red, she could feel something new when she touched people. A sort of memory pulsing beneath their skin. She tested it on a sleeping goat, only to see, for a flash, the day it was born, the hands that helped deliver it, the first steps it took. It frightened her, but fascinated her too. She began testing it secretly. A touch on her mother's arm. A grasp of a vendor's hand. Each time, a flash, a glimpse. Nothing more. But the moment she brushed against Taron, who had returned to the village under the excuse of mourning Oma, she saw blood. A knife. A pit. And Elira. But not as she was now, younger. A child. Lemi pulled away horrified. Taron's eyes narrowed. You're a curious one, he said. You always were. Stay away from her, whispered a voice behind him. It was Elira. Her veil gone. Her expression unreadable. She stood tall, different now. Sharper. Like someone who had remembered who she truly was. Taron's smile faded. Elira. I know, she said simply. I've seen it. The pit. The girl. The sacrifice. His jaw clenched. That wasn't. You stood there, she interrupted. You watched. You let it happen. Lemi's eyes widened. You were part of it? Taron didn't speak. Elira turned away, her voice colder than the wind. You married me to finish what your father started, didn't you? His silence was the only answer needed. That night, Elira returned to the grove where she'd first worn the mask. She knelt beside the altar stone, now cracked, its carvings faded, and placed the mask upon it. I need more, she whispered. The mask pulsed. And then, another vision. This one not from the past, but from a possible future. Lemi tied to the altar. A chorus of masked villagers chanting again. Taron watching from the shadows. And above them all, the Dirgebird, screaming, not singing. The scream of betrayal. Elira ripped herself from the vision, heart pounding. That's why the bird had returned. Not to kill, but to warn. The same sacrifice was being planned again. She found Lemi in the marketplace the next day, helping an old woman with baskets. We have to leave, Elira said, eyes wild. Tonight. Come with me. Why? They're going to try to offer you. You've been touched by the bird. That makes you valuable. To them. To the mask. To something ancient. Lemi blinked, confused and afraid. But my mother will be safe. Safer if you're gone. The beat. Then the child nodded. That night, the two of them crept past the sleeping village, slipping into the forest path that curved around the whispering ravine. Neither of them saw the figure in the trees watching them, hooded and still, or the bird that fluttered above, silent now, but ready to sing again. Back in the village, Taron stood before the altar tree, holding a silver dagger. "The mark has left," he said to the shadows gathered behind him. "But the bird hasn't stopped singing." "We'll find her," one said. "Or we'll offer another." The flames behind them flared. And far above the sacred tree, the Dirgebird opened its wings. Chapter 5. Blood on the Altar. The night pressed heavy on the forest, wrapping Elira and Lemi in a cloak of shadows and silence. Every step they took on the soft earth felt like a betrayal against the village they once called home, yet they knew there was no going back. "The river bends ahead," Elira whispered, clutching the mask beneath her shawl. "If we reach the crossing before dawn, we might find safety beyond the hills." Lemi nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "What if they follow us?" Elira's gaze hardened. "They won't catch us." But neither believed it. Behind them, the village stirred with alarm. Taron paced in the darkened chamber beneath the altar tree, his silver dagger gleaming coldly in his hand. "They escaped," he hissed to the shadows. "We cannot let them flee," a voice whispered back. "The mask demands balance." "Then we offer blood," Taron said, voice heavy with conviction. He lifted the dagger to the carved altar stone, tracing the ancient symbols. Outside, the air thickened. A low cry echoed, the Dirgebird's song, sharper, more urgent than ever. Meanwhile, in the forest, Elira paused. Her breath caught. A twig snapped. She spun. Nothing. But the hairs on her neck prickled. Lemi gripped her hand. "We're not alone," she said. From the darkness, figures emerged, cloaked villagers with faces masked in white bone, their footsteps soundless but certain. "Elira," a voice called. It was Taron. "You don't have to run." Elira's eyes burned with fury. "You lied to me. You betrayed me." "Listen," he pleaded. "This is bigger than us. The bird sings for a reason." "Then explain this," she spat, pulling the mask from beneath her shawl and holding it up. "What price are you willing to pay for power? For silence?" The masked figures closed in. Lemi stepped forward. "No. We won't be sacrifices." Suddenly, the air erupted in chaos. One of the masked villagers lunged forward. Elira dodged, feeling the cold rush of steel near her arm. Lemi screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that broke the forest silence. In that moment, the Dirgebird's song swelled, a haunting melody that froze time. The attackers halted, their eyes wide, unblinking. The bird circled overhead, wings spread wide, its song a warning and a curse. A voice broke through the spell. "Enough!" A figure stepped forward from the shadows, a woman with eyes like molten gold and hair the color of fire. She moved with the grace of a storm and the power of ancient roots. "Elira." "Lemi," she said, voice calm but fierce. "You carry the bird's mark. But you are not alone." The masked villagers lowered their weapons. Taron's face twisted in confusion and anger. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I am Nyala," the woman said. "Guardian of the balance between the living and the forgotten. Keeper of the Dirgebird's secret." She turned to Elira. "The mask you hold is not a weapon. It is a key. To unlock the truth buried beneath our lies." Elira's fingers tightened on the mask. "What truth?" Nyala's gaze pierced the darkness. "The truth of who we were. Who we must become. The sacrifice was never meant to end life. It was meant to protect it." Taron shook his head. "You speak in riddles." Nyala stepped closer. "The mask saw your father's sins, Taron. It saw your betrayal." He faltered. "But the bird's song calls for healing. For a choice. The village's future, and their lives, balanced on that choice." Elira looked at Lemi. Her heart raced. "Are you ready to face what the mask will reveal?" Lemi swallowed hard. "Yes." Above them, the Dirgebird landed on the altar tree. Its song softened to a whisper. The night held its breath. The first light of dawn crept like a whisper through the thick canopy of the whispering ravine. It painted Elira's face in pale gold as she, Lemi, and Nyala moved cautiously through the underbrush, the mask wrapped tightly in cloth beneath her cloak. Their journey back to the village was silent, heavy with unspoken fears. "This path used to be safer," Lemi murmured, glancing over her shoulder. Elira squeezed her hand. Things have changed. The village isn't what it was. Not since the bird began to sing again. Nyala's eyes scanned the horizon, alert. And it's up to us to change it again. This time for good. The village was waking. Smoke curled from chimneys. The faint sound of children's laughter drifted faintly. But beneath it, a storm was brewing. At the center, beneath the ancient altar tree, the elders had gathered, a council summoned in secrecy. Word had spread that the mask was back. That Elira and her allies carried it. The air was thick with tension when Elira stepped forward, Nyala at her side, Lemi clutching the feather now tucked in her hair. An elder with a face like cracked stone stood first. "You bring a weapon to our gates," he said, voice cold. "The mask is no weapon," Nyala answered steadily. "It is a key. The key to unlocking the lies that have shackled this village for generations." Taron stood among the elders, eyes dark, jaw clenched. "Elira," he said quietly, "you accuse us without proof." She met his gaze. "I have seen the truth. The sacrifices were never about protection. They were about control. About fear." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One elder spat, "You speak blasphemy. The Dirgebird sings for a reason." "But what if it sings for something else?" Elira pressed. "What if it sings for justice?" Nyala stepped forward, her voice ringing clear and commanding. "This village was built on secrets and silence. The Dirgebird watches those who suffer in the shadows. It sings not for death alone, but for those whose voices were stolen." Taron's eyes flickered with doubt. The weight of his heritage pressed on him, yet the woman who had once been his wife stood before him, fierce and unyielding. The council erupted into heated debate. Some elders clung to tradition, their faces hard as stone. Others whispered nervously, unsettled by the truths revealed. Then, a chilling voice cut through the room. "Enough!" From the back, a figure emerged, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a hood. "The mask belongs to the village," the stranger said. "Not to these traitors." Taron's eyes widened in recognition. "Della," he breathed. The room fell silent. Della was an elder thought dead years ago, exiled for crimes no one dared to speak of. Her return sent a wave of fear through the villagers. She stepped toward the altar, reaching for the mask wrapped in Elira's cloak. "This ends now." Elira stepped forward, shield raised. "No. This is only the beginning." The room exploded into chaos. Clashing voices, hands reaching for weapons, the air thick with betrayal and desperation. Nyala's voice rose above the din. "The choice is yours. Continue down the path of shadows, or step into the light." Taron looked around, torn between loyalty and truth. His hand shook. Finally, he spoke, voice low but firm. "I choose to stand with the truth." The elders who opposed them glared but withdrew. Della snarled, retreating into the shadows. But the threat remained. The battle for the village's soul had only just begun. Outside, the Dirgebird perched silently, its eyes like burning stars fixed on the altar tree. It sang, a song both mournful and resolute. The village was restless. Word of the mask's return and Nyala's challenge to ancient customs had spread like wildfire through the narrow alleys and dense woodlands that bordered the settlement. Elira, Lemi, and Nyala knew that standing against tradition was a dangerous gamble. The village's old ways ran deep, like roots twisting beneath the earth, entangling all who dared to challenge them. The sun was just beginning to rise when a harsh cry shattered the morning calm. "Prepare yourselves," shouted Taron, his voice echoing across the village square. On one side, those loyal to the elders gathered, faces set and stern, clutching wooden staffs and knives sharpened with determination. On the other, Elira's small band stood ready, hearts pounding but resolute. "I won't let this village drown in lies," Elira said firmly to Lemi as the two faced the crowd. "You're brave," Lemi whispered, "but this fight could tear us apart." Elira nodded. "We must. To save what's left, we need a new dawn." As the factions closed in, a sudden, eerie silence fell. A sharp cry cut through the tension, the Dirgebird's haunting song. Lemi stepped forward, feeling the feather in her hair pulse like a heartbeat. She raised her hands. "Listen," she cried. "Sing with me, sing for life, not death." The Dirgebird circled overhead, its wings beating like thunder. In response, the gathered villagers paused, faces turning upward in awe and fear. Lemi's voice grew stronger, weaving with the bird's song in a melody that seemed to reach into the very souls of those present. Suddenly, from the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, a stranger moving with unnatural speed. In one swift motion, the mask was ripped from Elira's grasp. Gasps filled the air. "Elira!" Lemi shouted. The stranger vanished into the forest, the stolen mask glowing faintly in their hands. Nyala's eyes narrowed. That was no ordinary thief. Taron clenched his fists. "We must follow." The chase plunged them deep into the ancient woods surrounding the village. Branches scraped their skin. Roots threatened to trip them. But they pressed on. Finally, at a clearing lit by flickering flames, they confronted the thief, the exiled elder, Della. Her eyes shone with bitter rage. "You think you can change fate?" she sneered. "The mask belongs to me, and through it, I will rewrite our destiny." Elira stepped forward. "You don't understand the cost of your ambition." Della laughed, voice cold. "Cost? I've paid more than you'll ever know." The flames crackled, casting dancing shadows as the tension thickened. Lemi felt the Dirgebird's presence stronger than ever, its song shifting from sorrow to fierce defiance. She closed her eyes and sang, channeling the bird's power. A sudden gust swept the clearing, extinguishing the flames. When light returned, the mask hovered between them, pulsing with energy. The battle for the village's future was no longer just physical, it had become a war of wills, of spirits. The forest around the altar tree was silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves stirred by a restless wind. Elira, Lemi, Nyala, and Taron tread cautiously into the sacred clearing, the stolen mask safely in Nyala's hands now. The air hung heavy with unspoken secrets. Lemi's gaze lifted to the altar's gnarled roots curling like ancient fingers into the earth. "This is where it all began," Nyala said softly, eyes tracing the carvings worn by centuries of rain and time. The Dirgebird's power was bound here, not to curse, but to protect the balance. Taron swallowed hard. "And we shattered that balance." Nyala nodded. "Blood was spilled to keep fear alive, but the truth waits beneath these roots." Suddenly, the ground trembled. Shadows shifted and from beneath the altar emerged a figure draped in twilight mist. The exiled elder, Della, returned with a force ancient and terrible. "You seek the truth?" Della's voice was a hiss, echoing like a chorus of lost souls. "Then come closer." A battle of wills ignited beneath the altar as Nyala and Della clashed in whispered incantations. The Dirgebird circled above, its song pulsing through the clearing, neither mournful nor triumphant, but a call to reckoning. Lemi stepped forward, feeling the feather pulse with warmth. Nyala extended her hand, transferring a fragment of the bird's essence. "Use it, Lemi. The song is yours now." As the ritual climaxed, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Darkness exploded across the village like a shattering storm. The exiled elder's ritual had awakened an ancient shadow, an entity feeding on fear, anguish, and sacrifice. Its tendrils stretched through the village, twisting hearts and bending wills. Elira and her allies raced against the spreading darkness. Taron, transformed by his choice, stood beside them with newfound resolve. "We fight not just for survival," Elira declared, "but for the soul of this village." Lemi closed her eyes and let the Dirgebird's song rise within her, a fierce, rising cry that pierced the night. The villagers, gripped by terror and confusion, saw the shadow's terrible shape looming above, eyes like voids, its voice a corrosive whisper promising doom. Nyala raised her staff, chanting in the old tongue. Light flared from the feather in Lemi's hair, weaving with the song, a tapestry of hope against the dark. Taron took a stand at the village center, shielding those too afraid to fight. "I was a prisoner of fear," he said, voice steady, "but I choose to be free." As the shadow entity lunged, the Dirgebird's cry shattered the night. a sound that held the promise of life amid death. Dawn broke with golden fire, flooding the village with light. The final battle had pushed every soul to their limits. Lemi, fully merged with the Dirgebird spirit, soared above the altar tree, her song weaving a shield of light and courage. Elira and Nyala fought fiercely beside her, their spirits unbroken. Taron, in a final act of sacrifice, confronted the shadow entity, binding it with ancient chains forged by love and redemption. With a shattering cry, the darkness dissolved into mist, swept away on the morning breeze. The Dirgebird landed gently on Lemi's shoulder, its song now a melody of healing and hope. The villagers, watching the new dawn, felt a lightness in their hearts, the weight of old blood debts finally lifted. Elira smiled, tears shining. The bird only sang at death, but now it sings for life. The wind carried the song far beyond the hills, a promise whispered on the breeze, a new beginning for a village reborn. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell for newly created content.